Hi, this is Amy Manis from AMA Atlanta. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be giving it a few minutes for attendees to pop into the webinar, and we'll be getting started shortly. Thanks so much. For those of you that have just joined, we'll be getting started in another minute. Hi, my name is Amy Manis. I am the VP of Programming for the AMA Atlanta. Thank you so much for everyone joining us today. Today, we're going to talk about the flexibility, fluidity, and innovation in sports marketing. First and foremost, we want to thank all of our sponsors: Nebo, Friendly Humans, Swarm, Hey Orca, Georgia Pacific, Goodway Group, Burt, Acquia, Hot House, Higher Profile, the AJC, Mercer University, and Google. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor of the AMA or learning more about the AMA and how you can get involved, just reach out at either our Twitter or hashtag, or we can follow up with one of the emails and you can reach out to someone. Well, we have our event today. We do want to highlight some additional events that we have coming up. We actually have two next week. On Wednesday, December 9th, at the same time at noon, our Innovation Committee is bringing together speakers that offer different perspectives about how brands are leveraging voice and audio as part of their holistic marketing strategies. Guests include Susan Bennett, the voice of Surrey, and executives from Pandora and Google. We also are doing the following day in conjunction with LA, New York, and the Puget Sound AMA is a happy hour called Holiday Cocktails in the Green Room. It's going to be an interactive trivia games, and we're going to have an event host followed by networking. So 2 events next week, both are free. You can register online at AMA Atlanta. And for today's event, flexibility, fluidity, and innovation in sports marketing. First and foremost, I want to introduce another co-board member with the AMA Atlanta and a huge advocate of all things related to Atlanta marketing, Joe Kaufman. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you, Amy. Really appreciate it. I'm so excited for this event today. Couple of just housekeeping things. We are going to leave some time at the end of this conversation for Q&A. So if you'll use the Q&A function within Zoom at the bottom of your screen, that would be great. We would love for you to send us some questions and then we'll field them in the last 15 minutes or so. We do want to make this a fluid and flexible conversation today. So I've got a set of questions that I'm going to ask the panel. But we may veer off course at some point during the day. So I just want to tee up the conversation before I introduce the 3 panelists. In March 2020, our entire world changed, as we all know, and particularly the sports marketing world was impacted by the leagues shutting down games. And during this panel, we really want to discuss how top sports marketers in Atlanta had to quickly adapt to the new realities of marketing in an industry that's predicated on selling tickets to fans in many cases. So during this hour, we're going to cover what these three marketing leaders have done in the last 9 months and some of the lessons that they've learned that could be valuable and relevant to the rest of us as marketers. We did have a pre-conversation about the fact that they are somewhat unique in that they're one of the few groups of marketers that have absolutely zero control over the product. Team goes on a big winning streak and everybody loves the marketing team. Team goes on a big losing streak and team doesn't love the marketing team, but they still, persist and work hard to do the best work they can for their teams. So without further ado, I want to start by, I'm going to do it in order of these slides. I want to start by introducing Morgan Shaw Parker, who is with ABM Sports and Entertainment, which is both the Atlanta Falcons and Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So welcome, Morgan.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Great, thank you. And next I've got Melissa Proctor with the Atlanta Hawks and State Farm Arena. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Jeff. Go Deeks.
Go Deeks. And finally, Adam Zimmerman with the Atlanta Braves.
Good to see you, Joe. Hi, Melissa. Hi, Morgan.
Hello.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us today. I've been waiting for this day for a long time. Super excited about it. And we're going to jump right into the meat of the conversation. But before we do that, I wondered if each of you could just take a minute to tell us a little bit about you and your role within the organization, and how long have you been in your current role as well? So maybe we'll start with you, Melissa.
Sure. I'm Melissa McGee Proctor. I have been with the Hawks organization for about 6 years now. I was with Turner Broadcasting prior to coming here for many, many years. Started my career as a ball girl for the Miami Heat. Here, day to day, I feel like marketing is everything happening within the Hawks organization these days. But running our Hawks Studios, our internal creative agency, all advertising and promotion, our retail, both our physical store and our e-com business, in addition to everything that happens from a game day perspective on court, and everything happening behind the scenes with entertainment for that as well. Brand communications, corp comm group, our basketball programs, so camps and clinics happening around the city of Atlanta, in addition to our corporate social responsibility work, and our Fan X group, so being out in the community, normally being able to do amazing things, which has all changed drastically over the past few months.
So that's basically, you don't really have any responsibilities.
Yeah, no, not really. It's cool.
All right, Morgan, why don't you tell us about your background and what you do for the Falcons and Mercedes-Benz Stadium?
Sure. So my name is Morgan Shaw Parker. I've been with the Falcons and the AMB Sports and Entertainment Group for about 4.5 years. I oversee all of our integrated marketing efforts, including brand and sales marketing, basically all of our storytellers, digital, UI, UX, our app, creative design for all of the family of businesses, and brand communications and broadcasts. So prior to this, I was with Nike for about 10 years in strategic communications across all of their categories, including football, with the Kansas City Chiefs for about 5 years prior to that in comms, and with a couple of different agencies on the front and back end of that.
Wow. All right, Adam, you're up.
Adam Zimmerman. I work closely with our president and CEO, Derek Schiller, on the brand, on all things marketing, digital, business intelligence, public relations, creative, community affairs, and our diversity efforts. Before coming to the Braves, this is just completed my 5th year. I was president of a sports marketing agency owned by Lonnie Cooper, who's a longtime agent and entrepreneur, called CSE, that's now part of Cooper Holdings.
Awesome. So before we jump into the other fun stuff, I want to know if any of you had a big marketing plan or idea that was like in January, you were all ready to execute that you had to completely dump. So I don't know if any of you want to jump in with something that you like had this big idea that you're like, it's not going to work now with COVID.
Yeah, I want to start only because I was so disappointed. So obviously we were in mid-season, almost at the end of our season, planning for Vince Carter's final game.
Right.
And we had this amazing idea of using the old Taco Mac space and building out an entire museum for Vince and for fans to come for about a week prior to the final game of the season, for fans to enjoy and get to know about his history, take pictures. We literally had a walkthrough the day that the season ended. So talk about an amazing marketing plan that didn't get to happen in that way. Hopefully we'll get to do something special, but yeah, definitely threw a monkey wrench in a lot of very, very well thought out plans.
We were in spring training, and so we were getting ready to start. And so we had a bunch of beautiful work that we were about ready to deliver. And, you know, our mantra quickly became adapt, adjust, and accept. You know, but we were ready to go because we were literally on the cusp of starting our season in March.
All right, I got one to try to top that. So basically we had to dump everything, grassroots, media buying, storytelling, and really pivot. And just like Adam said, we had to rethink everything, but we'd been working for literally 3 years to launch our brand new uniforms, all of them. And we'd been working with Nike and with the league for over 18 months, almost 2 years. And with 5 days to go, we had to scrap the entire fan event, the entire physical presence of how we would unveil those uniforms and pivot. We had about 47 people from all departments working overnight to be able to launch it completely digitally, virtually. And it actually ended up working out much better than we expected. In fact, it was the highest sales day in the company ever for those uniforms and those jerseys. But that probably gave me more gray hair than anything else in my career has.
You know, Joe, it was simultaneous. I think Melissa and Morgan would agree. Simultaneously, just terrifying and also exhilarating, right? Because literally, as we just said, everything was just blown up, and you really faced a situation where what was your usual course of action was now gone, and nobody knew. There were no answers. There was no playbook. And so that's where I think all of us found ourselves. And then you have to motivate yourself, you have to motivate your team, and go from there.
We conducted a COVID, we call it a COVID marketing survey to understand, you know, the impact of COVID on marketing, both budgets, morale, and marketing budgets, morale, and demand for products and services. We did it in April, we did it in August, but we asked in August whether marketing has been elevated as a discipline during COVID, if it's been demoted during COVID, or it's remained the same. And 50% of marketers that we heard from said that it actually got elevated due to COVID.
They're marketers, they should say that, right?
Well, you're right, they're optimistic too. But I'm curious if the three of you feel like, you know, we're all eyes on marketing when COVID hit, that say like, we need your help, or were they like, let's cut everything? I mean,
well, Joe, our job as marketers is really to see around the corner. Our job is to do the research, to understand the data, to glean the insights and figure out what to do next. Now, there are certain things that we have to do across the board. And with the pandemic, to Adam's point, it was terrifying. We were dealing with associates being impacted, their families being impacted, and you could almost feel the weight of the pandemic coming closer into your circle, closer into your circle. And so we were having to figure out how not only to protect our players, leaning on the leagues for information and for guidance, and they didn't have it. And so they were leaning on us on the ground to really figure out how to navigate, not only from a football operations and a team perspective, but from a marketing perspective. And so we had to lean in. We couldn't sit around, and we had to gather a lot of that information and really start to help in that process and make those assumptions.
And you think too, we have revenue we need to protect. So you can't sell tickets. You have to keep your season ticket holders in the fold. You have to keep connection to the community. You've got sponsors who your normal obligations to sponsors you can't fulfill. So Melissa, Morgan, and I found ourselves at the center of the storm, which is a good place to be, you know, in terms of you all need to help. What should we be doing right now? So yes, I would strongly reinforce that marketing got even more of a seat at the table at C-level.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree. And I think, you know, our goal is to drive demand. And ultimately, for a time when your product may not be existent, as ours were, we weren't playing at all. any touch point that happened virtually or digitally. And that's 100% what this team is responsible for, here at the Hawks. And so 100% to what Adam mentioned on corporate partnership and making sure that we're able to create. Now creativity really became the future of everything that had to happen. So creatively, what are we going to do? What are we going to create? What new opportunities? And that's where, the art and science of marketing comes into play 100%. And for us, it was all around what can we do for our community at this time, because we're a community asset before we are anything else. And so
Absolutely. And
exhilarating and scary.
Exactly. And Melissa, to steal a line that you said the other day when we were talking, is creativity is currency in marketing, in design, but also in business. And that's what makes a huge difference in terms of organizations that are able to pivot in times like that, or organizations who aren't.
And you think, Joe, too, that fundamentally it was not just for our industry, but for many other industries, a black swan moment, right? All of a sudden, a factor came into reality that completely disrupted your business model, which for us is in large part of, I need to sell Joe a ticket to come to my venue, at which point I'm hopeful that he will spend money on concessions. I'm hopeful he will buy things in my gift shop. And so much of that then had to be reimagined on the spot, because the fundamental way that you drive your business model is gone for the moment and for the foreseeable future. And then what do you do?
Yeah, well, that was a perfect segue to the next question, because you sort of mentioned in one of our conversations that there was a brand new sense of urgency. There was urgency before, but talk about much more pressure and urgency. So I don't know, what did you, when the pandemic first hit, what was the first step?
I can start on that one. It was to learn. It was to put your pen down, sit down, take care of your people first, listen to your associates. How are they feeling? What's going on in the business? But just as important is to learn. And I'm so grateful for the relationships that Arthur Blank has in our community, and leaning in with some of our long-term partners. Sanjay Gupta came to talk to our leadership team, partnering with Emory to really understand what the implications were, and not just what World News Tonight was telling us. So for us, that was important, and to learn and lean into other industries, similar industries to ours, the same industry as ours, but also completely different industries from ours, figuring out what they're doing and what they're talking about. So it was a lot more work in that regard.
I 100% agree, because I think, on our end, we created a coronavirus task force probably a couple of weeks before everything shut down. And a lot of it was, what do we know, what may change? A lot of, modeling of what could happen. No one knew. And I think having comfort in knowing that we are all on the same playing field, because no one had all the answers. It really was, what can we do? What can we learn? What needs to happen first? And I think we defined our guiding principles as an organization. And the very first one was keeping our people safe. It was safety among everything else. And then understanding what it is we can do for our business, what needs to happen for our teams. And I remember when we kind of sent everyone home saying, let's just go a couple of weeks at a time and we'll see what happens. And, after the first 3 weeks, we'll say, all right, well, let's try another 3 weeks. And then over time, it's like, all right, let's go for months. But at the beginning, it was so interesting because we were mid-season. I remember speaking to our game ops team during the last game when we figured out that, the NBA was shutting down. We kind of, at the end of the season, sit and talk to everyone and say, hey, great season. And I remember sitting there with one of my leaders, and he was like, all right, well, we'll see you guys back in a couple of weeks. And I was like, we don't know that.
Yeah.
However, we want to thank you, and that we're going to be in this together. Whatever you need, we're here, and just really support. But I just remember the uncertainty was so vivid at that time, because everyone thought like, oh yeah, we know you've never stopped an NBA season. And that's exactly what
ours was a little bit more urgent. We were going to open the doors in 2 weeks for our home opener. And so all of a sudden it was like, wow, we can't have a home opener. We've got sponsor commitments. We have to create an at-home opener. We have to, for our fans, talk about the baseball season as if it's actually going to happen. And so I think all of us in various ways went to digitize everything that we do. And I know we're going to talk about that here in a little bit, but there was this acceleration of all things digital. And I know the learning for me is, we had been remiss in not digitizing everything that we do. And that's going to be standard operating procedure for us moving forward, that if you have a bricks and mortar execution, you're going to have a digital twin. And we got there just because we had to get there. And then over time, it became more of a strategy as opposed to a reaction, which is what it was on March 13th. It was very much a reaction. Like, wow, we're going to start in 2 weeks. What do we do?
And for us, we were in the middle of the off season, which doesn't mean we were kicking back, eating bonbons. It was a crazy time for us. We're going into the draft. We're going into what we knew would be a tough off season, a tough season. But we were really watching what Melissa was doing. I was watching what Adam was doing, watching what some of these other industries were doing, and really learning and saying, man, how would I do that? How would I approach that? Or why are they doing it this way? You know, not to mention COVID was changing things, but you had massive social unrest piled on top of that, a crazy election year piled on top of that. It almost felt like it couldn't get worse. And so we were forced to pivot again. And so for us, the big thing is, you know, those who are willing to lean in and learn and communicate and almost throw their plans out the door and build them together, they're going to come out ahead. But those who aren't willing to do that will fail. And you can see there's a lot of businesses out there who aren't thriving right now.
Yeah. Adam, you'd mentioned, I think, during a previous conversation that you also, and I think, Morgan, you mentioned this too, looking to some industries outside of the sports industry for advice, guidance, or, you know, but like you mentioned, Adam, the arts is a good example where museums rely on patrons buying tickets and seeing the art, you know. So tell me about any of you that maybe leaned outside of the sports marketing world to get guidance or advice or consideration even.
The first point to make is that, you know, the three of us, and Joe, you've seen that from our interaction, the three of us, we talk to each other. Yeah. Our organizations talk to each other, you know, frequently because we're all in it together. And then you go outside of Atlanta and you talk to your friends in LA and Chicago and Boston and other places. What are you guys doing? What can I learn from you? And then to your point, I think, and that's all of us, what we need to do is be inspired. What were musicians doing? Because live music was just, was dealt a catastrophic blow. What were people in the music industry doing? What were museums? What was anybody who was reliant on someone walking through your door up to? You know, for myself, I've been very, very inspired by what Delta's done with their Delta Care Standard in terms of how they are saying, listen, Morgan, when you're ready to fly, we've got you. Here's all the different things that we're doing. And so you'd be remiss if you didn't take your blinders off of just being in sports business and look at what the rest of the world was doing, how everybody was wrestling with this.
I would just add to that to say, you know, I was looking at not only the Deltas, but grocery chains. You know, Publix did an incredible job. I don't know about everybody else's Publix, but all of the 5 or 6 that I had been into early on in the pandemic, they did a phenomenal job really making sure that we felt comfortable coming back to the grocery store. They were the first ones that I saw to put up the plexiglass. They were the first ones to put the dots on the floor. And I thought, man, how innovative is that? And it's so simple. We looked at retail, talked to friends back at Nike and Jordan, you know, the food delivery systems, how Amazon had to pivot, how UPS and FedEx had to pivot. So there's a lot to learn from industries that are like your own and completely different from your own.
Is there any idea that you all stole from one of those other industries that you think, I mean, not stole, but that you thought was such a good idea that you wanted to implement it in your own organization?
Gosh, so many, so many. I mean, it takes a village to be able to get through a situation like this. You know, one of the things that we knew we had to do is when you're talking about making people comfortable to come back into a venue, you've got to think about cleaning. You've got to think about sanitizing. You can't just be passing out, you know, bottles of hand sanitizer. So we've got drones now that do that sanitization for us. And we were working on stuff like that well before the pandemic, but it really, you know, got put into warp speed when we got to March.
Very much so. I think similarly, you know, on the Hawk side, during the summer, we normally are doing basketball camps and clinics around the city. And so we're sitting here with this basketball programs team and we have coaches lined up and kids signed up, and we quickly had to pivot and developed, you know, Hawks at Home packs with basketballs and, jerseys for kids to be able to play and learn at home, and creating digital content for all of these, skills-based challenges that we would normally do in person, and creating a platform which, to be honest, we've been able to scale and help and impact so many more youth in the city playing basketball through Hawks at Home than we would have been through traditional camps and clinics. And now in the future, to Adam's point, we're going to have to do both and continue looking to do both as we move forward. But I'm on the board for the Children's Museum of Atlanta, and just even learning from them, because they had to figure out how to open doors and be there for parents who are at their wits' end and I want to get my kids outside. And so even understanding their process of reopening was really interesting for me, in the ways that they're able to do that and what we can learn and apply to our businesses as well. And
Joe, I'm sorry, listen.
No, go ahead.
And Joe, I think too, you asked the question of what can you steal, or what did you learn? My personal inspiration, and I'll be the first to tell you, this wasn't my orientation. I did not grow up a gamer, but I was blown away by what we were able to learn with Fortnite and Roblox, and in particular, how Fortnite created environments and what they did with Travis Scott. And so, my big takeaway there to my mantra of digitize everything is we've been remiss in not having digital twins of all of our facilities. Why not Fortnite for us? Why not a digital State Farm Arena, or a digital Mercedes-Benz, or a digital Truist? We're going to do that. And why not program our digital venue in the same way that we learned from Fortnite? So I was very inspired by what I learned from Fortnite, Roblox, and in particular Unreal Engine, what the capabilities are. And particularly as we all try to get younger, as we try to get to Gen Z, we need to be doing that type of stuff anyway. But what can we learn if we really commit to digitizing and gamifying everything we do?
I've got a little curveball question for you all then. What's one thing that you had already prepared pre-COVID that you said, thank goodness I had that in place because that's helped me carry through? And what's one thing that you wish, you kind of said one you wished, Adam, which was, I wish we had digitally had a real presence in all those platforms. But so what's something that you wish you had done pre-COVID? Sort of like I've been talking about, retailers that implemented e-commerce pre-COVID had a big advantage over those that were scrambling to get e-commerce in place post-COVID. So I don't know if there was anything that you all, were thank goodness we had that in place, or I really wish we had that in place.
Now, I'll kick it off on something that I was so glad that we had already been working on. From the day I got here, the digital mindset and growing and building our integrated digital platforms and storytelling engine, that has been a primary focus from day one. And when I started, I was hired as a VP of communications, and it really then merged from digital and communications and merging those groups, and then bringing in marketing and creative design and UI, UX and app and all of those things. You could call it a communications engine. You could call it a marketing engine. I mean, this day and age, and we talk about it all the time, marketing is communications, communications is community relations is digital. It's all working together. And so what I was very thankful for is that we had already brought our audiences almost back from the dead over 4.5 years. We can't, as sports engines, live and die by wins and losses. You just can't. You have to represent more as a brand. And so it really, for us, we already did represent more, but we just weren't connecting the dots within our digital platforms. So we were already there, and now it's just warp speed. So I was very thankful that we had that foundation already.
We had committed to data. We'd spent a lot of time and effort overhauling all of our CRM. That's in my organization, and I think my fellow marketers would agree that data-enabled learning and having that as the backbone and syncing that up to creative is a mandatory. So we had really endeavored to build a state-of-the-art CRM and data-enabled platform, and putting people on customer journeys and so forth. So having that, being able to build that and enhance it at a time that we needed it, and really sync it up to social media, right? Because I think social media nowadays started out, first iteration, vanity metrics. Hey, look how many Facebook followers we have, and look how much engagement we have. And then that went to, let's be a little bit more sophisticated. Well, what exactly does that mean? Can we kind of get to email off of the social media, and that's great. And I think the third that I will talk about later is how that looking at social media against a platform business strategy is probably where we need to go next. So I would say committing to data was what I was pleased we had done.
Yeah, and I think similarly for us, we had done a lot on the data side as well as with our social team. And we had built an internal group called Hawk Studios, which initially was just our video content. And we actually looked at merging our graphics and creative teams together to make it more robust. But what we had really done over the past maybe year or two was really tight collaboration with our corporate partnerships team. And I think we mentioned as soon as the change happened, everything that we would traditionally do, which was almost rote and understanding how we can secure those corporate sponsorship dollars, went out the window. And so if we didn't have the team already developed and working so closely and collaborating in the ways that we were, I don't think we would have been able to sustain as quickly and bounce back as we have throughout the summer, and being able to ensure that we didn't miss a beat. We were able to continue those relationships, develop content quickly in order to support not only the work and enhancing the brand and informing our fans as to what was going on, but also making sure that our partners were on board with us, which was huge. And I think the other part that I'm personally incredibly pleased of, not so much from a COVID perspective, but more on the social justice side, is since I started this position as CMO maybe 3 or 4 years ago, the very first project that I worked on with Nike was developing our city edition uniform, which in my mind was what's the most thing that's relevant in Atlanta for our city. And it was, Dr. King and all the work that Dr. King had done. And so knowing that 3 or 4 years ago, we started this conversation because being true to Atlanta, having a team that's very much around diversity and inclusion, being able to educate the next generation of Atlantans on the legacy of Dr. King was something I was personally very passionate about. And not in a million years could I ever have imagined that the time that this launched, we would be in the way that we are as a nation right now. And so the fact that we were able to not only continue that process and we're able to execute a launch of that uniform that we're going to wear on court for the first time, hopefully, on King Day next season, it couldn't have come at a better time just in being able to help tell that story and being true to our brand from the very beginning. And that's been the most impactful for me.
Yeah.
Melissa, it's been absolutely incredible to watch too. Kudos to you and your team for leading all of us in that space.
It's beautiful, important, and powerful work, Melissa. It really is.
So you brought up kind of some constituencies, Melissa, and I know all of you have a lot of different constituents. I mean, obviously there's the fans, there's your staff, there's the management of the organizations that you're a part of, there's leagues, there's sponsors, there's employees. So, when you've been punched in the face, which we all got punched in the face, but you all particularly got punched in the face, in March with disruption of your product, right? Like most of us at least still had a product, and you all got disrupted. So how do you show value to those different constituencies, quickly once you got punched in the face?
In a myriad of different ways. I think it's looking at what's available as assets or resources and what you have at that time. And for us, I remember the very beginning, we talked a little bit, earlier around testing and learning and how a lot of times we want to incorporate science and, we want qualitative and quantitative research to back things up. We didn't have time for any of that.
Right.
It's like, we're going to try stuff. And I remember sitting in a brainstorm, and this is what happens. We were speaking with the entertainment team, and they said, hey, we have some members of our dance team that have kids. Maybe we should read stories and we can create content because, kids are at home and we can do bedtime stories and, we can get Harry the Hawk with a book. And so we said, all right, well, let's try it. And we tried it and it did not work well, but because we tried it. And I think that's the most important part. And what we've really learned is how to fail fast. There wasn't necessarily a lot of time to test, but, as on a regular basis, if we weren't doing that, we wouldn't be able to develop new platforms, new ideas, new things like Hawks at Home that we were then able to not just help the community, but also monetize in other ways. And so for me, it was whatever we can do, a good idea can come from anywhere. There is no hierarchy in creativity.
And a mantra here that we laugh about is it elevated, wouldn't it be cool, to the forefront, right? Because sometimes, people will say, well, my only concern is, and there's a place for my only concern. I mean, but you want to get that a little bit down the line, but it really elevated to Melissa's point, wouldn't it be cool was the mantra, because we really needed to think that way. And that's something that we're going to be able to keep going and sort of flipping my only concern is, which tends to derail ideas, and there's a place for it, but elevating the wouldn't it be cool. And for us, we leaned on our players. That was really fun to see. We really leaned into them and their personalities, and that's a huge part of why people are fans of our teams. And then we were able to get on the field, right? And then it was really, let's really get down back to, and Joe, we did have a product, right? Our product for all of us is our games. That's where we start, right? It's the competition. It's why people are drawn to our various sports. And it really said to us, let's strip away maybe all of the sediment that's been on our product over time, and let's blow it all off, and let's start with the basics. Let's build back out from the game. And I think one of the most remarkable things that we have as an industry is we get to relaunch. Think about that. I mean, we've pretty much been shuttered. Melissa's going to relaunch, right, here in a few weeks. And that, what business gets a chance to really do that, to reset an entire industry? And we should be inspired by that.
I would echo everything that Melissa and Adam said, but for us, it was also fostering even more of a creative culture. Adam and Melissa are right. Big ideas matter. And we were forced into, we need big ideas fast. Yeah. And, once again, we have in a lot of ways lived and died by wins and losses. And that doesn't work if your brand doesn't have any more relevance in the community that it seeks to serve. And so that was really important for us. It is to make sure that we were in lockstep, like Melissa said, with our partners, and making sure that we could leverage their assets and their value and their brain power to be able to do more for our community as well. And, we talk about what will we apply later on after this pandemic. It's a lot of that thinking. And as Melissa said, fail fast. It's also fail forward. Take what you learn and move. And it's more, it's better, and it's faster, because that's what our business requires. And as marketers, that's what our consumers require.
So I think also we talked a little bit about rivalries. I mean, we all have our natural rivals. I mean, certainly the Falcons and Saints are a good one, and Braves and Nationals may be one, et cetera. But you all don't compete with each other for fans, like directly. In the city of Atlanta, you're competing for entertainment dollars and things like that. So has the pandemic caused any new cooperation that maybe didn't exist beforehand? I know you talked about seeking outside of your industry, but is there new cooperation that's happened with rivals?
I think that's happening all over the place. I mean, just between the three of us right now, I'm so excited to be able to partner with Melissa. Our two organizations are partnering within this next voting cycle to be able to use our venues as voting sites. And we're learning everything from what Melissa's team has already done. And we're studying what they've done so that we can go apply it and work together with them. Something I will mention that's very relevant today is, one of our players, Hayden Hurst, we're releasing a video about his story and his struggle on mental health and mental health awareness. So when you think about two NFL teams dropping a rivalry between us and the Cowboys, when Hayden Hurst went up to Dak Prescott on the field afterwards, didn't even think about him being mic'd. And he basically said, hey, man, I know what you're going through. My mom and I have a foundation, and we're here to help you. Well, that went viral, and we're now able to open up and tell Hayden's story and help millions of people in a pandemic where mental health is a really big problem. And so I'm excited. Check our site and our social handles later today. The story's powerful, and it's definitely something that we should all lean into more.
One other thing that came out of that same COVID marketing survey that we did was we asked what new initiative has been implemented in your marketing organization that's been important. And the number one thing was team mental health specifically, because we're all experiencing, work from home and lack of physical contact and social contact with others. So I think it's exacerbated and elevated some of those issues, but that's wonderful to hear, Morgan, that you were able to take an organic as marketers, that's gold because it gave you an excuse to talk about something you might have had a hard time talking about otherwise.
Well, and it also raises a good point. It was and continues to be a very stressful time for everybody, right? And especially for all of us organizationally. A lot of us have suffered, the loss of some personnel at our various organizations. It's an industry that's been under siege. So a lot of this too, Joe, was keeping our teams motivated, keeping yourselves motivated with all of the uncertainty. And I think that still is playing out. And to the point we made earlier, yes, you can learn a lot from failure, but you know what's even cooler? Winning, right? So getting those wins and building on wins was so incredibly important for morale. And to Melissa's earlier point, where you became so egalitarian, where the ideas were coming from, it really became a nice cultural reinforcement where everybody had to contribute. And it was like, yes, let's go with that. And so the ability to win, to build small wins and turn them into larger wins. Sure, you learn a lot from failure. I think you learn way more from winning.
And I think on our side, we definitely got to a point early on where everyone was in marketing. It didn't matter where you were sitting in a meeting, it's like, oh, how about this? And there were ideas coming left and right from everywhere, and it was great. And I think, personally, one of the things that I noticed, just as my cultural anthropology hat sitting in my seat, our organization collaborated better than we probably ever have before when we weren't able to physically be around each other.
Wow.
Through phone calls. I mean, and my teams especially will say it. They're like, we are firing at all cylinders, kind of out of need because we had to. Yeah. It was almost like when you remove these other barriers and this is all that you have, everyone came in together because we all saw the greater good and what needed to happen from a business perspective. And personally, as a leader, I'm very much around having grace. I have a 6-year-old daughter. I've been homeschooling and CMOing every day from the beginning of this pandemic. And, one of these days I got our team psychologist to come and just have a conversation with our entire marketing organization on what resources and tools can I use personally to be okay? Because you can't do anything if you're not okay. And I really think more than anything for us, to Morgan's point on mental health, it's critical. And even though we're about to start this season, we're still not out of this pandemic.
Right.
So continuing to have grace with our team and knowing that, family and people are first. If you're not okay, we can't even be here doing what we do.
Mm-hmm. 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 So we've got a lot of good questions in the Q&A that I want to get to in just a minute. So I'm going to pick maybe one more from my list here. I do want to talk before we miss the chance to talk about social justice a little, because I know each of the 3 leagues that you're a part of have made efforts from a social justice standpoint, and many of your teams have also done that too. How has that changed what you do or your thinking on how you approach marketing?
Well, I'm happy to start because, this summer changed me personally. There was so much going on, and I am proud to be a part of an organization. We were the first team, in the league to have a diversity and inclusion leader for our group, our ownership from day one. When everything was happening and there were protests right outside our offices, he said, Black Lives Matter, there's no in between. Mm-hmm. And we may have lost fans because of it. There may be people who weren't okay with what was said, but it was, as an organization, we're going to lean in and this is what we believe and this is what we're going to do. And so our head coach, Lloyd Pierce, was probably the most vocal of any coach in the league and just going out and really speaking on behalf of our organization. And even when we had internal talks, the most important thing for us was learning. It was learning for everyone, not regardless of your race. There was still so much we needed to learn about one another, about what was needed, around how to fix the system. And so even the idea of opening up our building for voting was so much more of how can we empower the citizens of Atlanta to have a choice and to do things in a way where they can be safe from a COVID perspective. All these things that we were doing wasn't, it wasn't marketing. There was no dollars, there was no revenue. It was because it was the right thing to do for our community. And so, that coupled with everything else that's happening right now, it gives me a lot of pride. The NBA, obviously, with the bubble and the restart, was very vocal at the beginning. Putting Black Lives Matter on the court was something that, as a league that's pretty progressive, it was very powerful. But it's something that we're not just about the talk, it's the work behind it. Mm-hmm. So economic empowerment being one of the most important things that's necessary to make change. Having an owner that's invested in the Russell Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship has been huge. And that's a lot of the work that we're going to continue after work partnering with Morgan and team on voting for the runoffs as we go into the season and beyond. This isn't a moment in time for us. And as a leader, that's one of the things that I'm most committed to, is ensuring that we do this work for the long haul, not just for today.
I'll echo everything Melissa said. This has become such a deeply personal thing for all of us. What was really interesting to me, and I'll start with our associates who, you know, as you guys know, your associates become your family. But in this pandemic and throughout this time of social justice and what's been going on in our communities, it's forced us to sit down and not just listen to each other, but hear each other and really truly understand what matters. And what I'm so grateful for, again, is, you know, this is not a new space for the Falcons. It's not a new space for Arthur Blank. It's not a new space for Atlanta United. You know, from a macro level, I believe that we in sports have a huge obligation to listen, to take action, to ensure we're reflecting the community that we seek to inspire. So, you know, I've always believed, and our organization believes, that sport is a catalyst for bringing communities together. It's a catalyst for social change. We've got the ability to change perspectives because our industry focuses on human beings, stories of individuals and teams overcoming obstacles and hardships. And as much as our society idolizes athletes, it's incumbent upon us to help them use their platforms for good, because that's what we believe we should be doing with our platforms. But before we even do that, we as brands and as teams and as organizations have to determine what we stand for. And the good news on our end is I was so thankful that we had already done all of that work. And I work for an owner who has an extremely strong foundation. You know, obviously he's just got a book that's come out recently that he's been working on for a little while called Good Company, where purpose and profit are not mutually exclusive. To Melissa's point, in this time, you know, we were already connected with our Players Social Justice Committee. That wasn't something that was newly formed. It's, you know, been going on for years. And what was a focus for them in, you know, police brutality and sitting in with our police forces and connecting with youth and what they were doing in years past really turned to voting. And for 15 years, our organization has gotten our players registered to vote for 15 years. So that's not new space, but the players leaned all in that. And, you know, lo and behold, here we are being able to partner with Melissa in things like using our two massive venues to bring people together. It's been a powerful time for all of us.
I was personally inspired by our players. You know, you have a bunch of young athletes, this generation of athletes, as I know Melissa and Morgan will reinforce, they have opinions, they have platforms, and it was really, really inspirational to be able to hear them, to be able to support some things that they wanted to do in our community. So that was, for me, a really great key learning and very inspirational, in addition to the things that we partnered with Major League Baseball to do. And then some really, as Morgan said, we have a diversity and inclusion council here at the Braves. It's been in operation for many years, and having really, really honest conversations internally. It was a very, very powerful experience.
I'm going to give a quick plug to something that I've been working on. I know Melissa's been working on too, and Morgan maybe has as well, called the A Pledge. If you're an agency here in Atlanta, it's just a pledge that your organization will reflect the community in which we live by the next 10 years. And so what we're doing is we're having brands jump on board as well to say, look, I'm going to favor agencies who've made the commitment to have their organizations reflect the diversity of our market. Pretty simple. So you can go to the apledge.com and read more about that and sign up for the pledge. So thank you all. Melissa, thank you for helping spearhead that effort particularly. We've got a couple of good questions from the audience. This one is with a focus on people and reframing what determines success. How will KPIs evolve, and what KPIs? So are we tossing out some of the KPIs that existed pre-COVID and now have a new set of KPIs, or are some of them persistent?
I think things are absolutely going to change, or evolve, I should say. And we may get back to a point where they're similar, but, you know, if in the old school mentality, it's like my job is butts and seats. Right now, if that's my main KPI, that is absolutely not my KPI, because that's not the environment that we're in. So really being focused on how do we generate revenue as an organization a lot of that is going to really turn its eye to corporate partnership in new and unique ways. And how do you not just maintain the dollars that we currently have, but try to increase them without having the eyeballs of butts and seats?
Yeah.
How do we really look at digital and second screen opportunities and how to monetize those in different ways? So I think the KPIs will evolve. But ultimately, hopefully, once we get back to a sense of normalcy and people are comfortable coming out, then I think it changes for the long run. That kind of combines where we are now with where we're headed in the future.
Agreed. I think we literally rip up the script and start anew. And we have to assume, and I know that Melissa and Morgan are doing this, we have to sort of plan several different iterations, right, on what 21 looks like. But what I have to assume, and I think the ladies would echo this, is that I'm still going to have a compromised business model, i.e., we're not going to be able to swing open the gates and have max capacity. I'm hopeful that we get there sooner than later. But to Melissa's exact point, well, okay, that usually is my 100% business model, but now I have to augment that. And now I have to find revenue in other unexpected ways. And where are those? And I agree with Melissa wholeheartedly. I think a lot of those answers are in digital. I think a lot of those are in our data. A lot of those we haven't invented yet. So, but that's, I think, where the exhilaration for all of us as marketers and our ability to directly impact the business is the opportunity for 21 and beyond.
And I agree with everything that Melissa and Adam have said, but gone are the days where it's about butts in seats or impressions. It's about moving people. We've got to really figure out ways to connect with our fans where they want to be connected with, where they're consuming content. It's about working hard to make them like us. And hopefully then we grow to love. We want them to love us. And then hopefully they're going to spend a little time with us. And then maybe they'll spend $1 with us, much less buy a season ticket with us. And so it really is going along and remapping our consumer journeys. And how do we do that with a completely different consumer mindset? You know, what normally would change from year to year literally changes from month to month now. And so again, it's incumbent upon us as marketers to be on the forefront and see around the corner.
Morgan makes a huge point. You know, one of the things that I've been fascinated with, and I think Morgan and Melissa would agree, is we have millions upon millions of people that follow us on our social platforms. And people that, and those people became even more important to us when we couldn't sell them tickets. And guess what? Those millions and millions of people probably aren't going to walk through our turnstiles. In fact, there's more people that follow us on a daily basis than all of our attendance for the entire year. So what do you do with that audience, which is perhaps underutilized and undermonetized? And I think one of the answers lies in our social platforms, which I think we're not looking at in the correct way. We're not thinking about our social platforms, not just as vanity metrics, not just as, oh, great, you know, we can put them on email consumer journeys, but how can we build value in a true platform business model, fan to fan? What could we find in these millions of people that interact with each other? I don't know, but I'm really interested to find out.
I heard somebody on your team tell a story about seeking deep fans of Ronald Acuna and surprising and delighting them with, you know, hey, I'm going to send you something that Ronald Acuna signed or something. What other, you know, programs are you all doing that are trying to get that digital audience to engage in a deeper way than just buying a ticket? Does anybody else have a story about that?
Well, I think data, you know, we all agree that meeting the needs of fans is base package, right? I mean, you've got to do that. We've got the tools to be able to understand what fans want. And that's a mandatory. Give the fans what they want. What's more interesting is giving them what they don't know they need. and that's, you know, whether that's Steve Jobs or whether that's Henry Ford saying, hey, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses. I.e., you know, you need to invent new categories, you need to invent. And I think Melissa's mantra of creativity meets data-enabled learning, that's where we can really make some magic. Is what's next? What do people don't even know that they want that then they can't live without?
You know,
us right now, it's about humanizing our players, our team, our brand. It's about telling stories about people and making true, authentic connections and pulling back that curtain. I mean, I take for granted sometimes the things that I get to see every day, but the Hayden Hurst stories about mental health awareness and how Raheem Morris is leading a team as an interim head coach, and what Julio Jones goes through on a daily basis. It's being able to build those relationships and gain that access within our own teams to be able to tell those stories.
I agree. I mean, and for me, we just got out of an amazing free agency period and draft. And so the excitement of what we're going to have on the court next season is amazing. But at the same time, I also look at juxtaposed worlds and see what's happening. Like the Versus Challenge and what has gone on digitally throughout this pandemic is amazing. What's the basketball equivalent of that? I have no idea. But in my mind, it's really looking at how do we take things from pop culture, really understanding your target audience. And I think of everything else for me as a marketer, that is my bread and butter, knowing who exactly you're for, what is moving them, and then find ways to move them similarly or in ways that they didn't expect. And that whole idea of zigging when they zag is probably where we're really going to be focused on the future creatively. And there are also just a couple of other things that, how do you just get things to people easier? And so for me, that whole idea of whatever that second screen opportunity may look like, I have no idea. If fans can't come in the building right now, what does entertainment look like as you watch the game at home? It's wide open for innovation. And so that's kind of where we're thinking.
Somebody asked, we only have time for probably one or two more questions. Somebody asked, they mentioned the girls flag football program specifically. And they said, what's another solution that you're proud of in the last year? And specifically for Falcons, this question was about that, but endearing Atleans to the Falcons and A&B. But I'm curious if there's a program that Melissa or Adam or Morgan that you all have done that has flown under the radar, but maybe, made an impact in a smaller way or in a more localized way. The opening up State Farm Arena to voting, I voted there. It was an amazing experience. It was such a great experience. And that was innovative and new and got lots of big headlines and press. But what's something that maybe flew under the radar a little bit that you were proud of?
Well, you mentioned Girls Flag. I could talk for days about our community relations function and what they've done in that space. We were able to get it sanctioned as a middle school and high school sport in the state of Georgia, which was only the fourth state to have that happen. And probably a state that would never have had that happen had the Falcons not leaned in. One of the things I'm excited about that we're leaning in more, and it needs to be done more, is leaning in with women. And it's not just the shrink it, pink it, bling it mentality. It's how do we reach women where they are and with what they want to talk about. In a lot of cases, they know a heck of a lot more about football than their male counterparts do. But that's something that I'm excited about. It's flying under the radar. And we call it women's initiatives sometimes in the NFL, and it drives me crazy. So that's one that is flying under the radar. The Girls Flag, I don't think, is given enough credit for what it's being able to do to change the lives of these young women. When I see our players leaning in to teach and coach and be a part of that as well, it's one of those moments that far exceeds anything else that could give me that satisfaction when I come to work.
It's so similar. And I think for me, because I have a 6-year-old daughter, we have a program called Lady Ballers. And all last year and for the past couple, we've done a number of camps and clinics and had amazing opportunities for these girls to learn from women, myself included, that are speaking around positions in sports, how you can grow yourself in a career in the sports industry, and just really encouraging more young girls to play basketball. Right now, we're launching a program called Game Growers with Nike, where we're giving a girl an opportunity to build a program here in Atlanta to encourage more girls to play sports. Those things aren't necessarily talked about broadly, but they're absolutely important and something that we're going to continue to champion as well.
I was proud, and I know Melissa has done work in this, and I believe Morgan has too, with our efforts against food scarcity, which is an enormous issue in our community. And we had all of this beautiful food that was ready to go, right? We were going to open our doors in a couple of weeks. And so we created a program called Home Plate, and we partnered with an organization called Gooder here in town, which is just does amazing work.
Amazing.
And we were able to use that food and distribute it widely. And I know Morgan and Melissa are also involved in food scarcity. And the other one that I'm really proud of is we did an event called the 44 Classic, named after our icon, Hank Aaron, which was a showcase for African-American high school baseball players. And sadly, sometimes in baseball, travel ball, is an economic barrier, and a lot of kids don't get looked at. They don't scout. And so we were able to put together a showcase for these amazing athletes, and a lot of these young athletes got scholarships. A lot of them got drafted. So it was something that was very important to Hank Aaron that we were able to execute, and I was very proud of that this year.
Amazing. Well, we're right at the 1 o'clock hour. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been an amazing conversation. We need to do part 2. We'll include Atlanta United, and we'll, in part 2, and we'll do a part 2 maybe post-COVID to talk about what's changed. So thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, Adam. This has been an awesome conversation.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks for having us.